Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. I was just on BBC Radio 2's Jeremy Vine's show debating Islamophobia and the comments by Lee Anderson, and unfortunately it was a really good example of how the right loves to argue. I say unfortunately because it was with Benedict Spence, somebody who usually argues really well and really rationally, but this time he was pulling straight from the Jordan Peterson handbook. You know that thing where Jordan Peterson always talks about the radical left, where he either talks about either the most extreme versions of people on our side of any argument, or he labels anybody with progressive views as radical, in order to make it look like his way of thinking is the only reasonable option. Because listen to how Benedict Spence tries to frame the calls for a ceasefire in Gaza.
I'd say that his language was very clumsy, and it's been very unfortunate that he's said it, and I think it's rather interesting that he's refused to apologise. I'll get to that though in a second. Now, we have to be honest here. Gaza is a very significant issue for a great swathe of the capital city, and I don't think it's an unfair thing to say that that constitutes a great deal of Sadiq Khan's own voting base. And that's not just Muslims. We have to be very clear about that. It is as much an issue for members of the political far left in this country, as we saw under Jeremy Corbyn and as we see on the streets every week. They're not just Muslims. They are, people on the left. They are white. They are from all kinds of backgrounds as well.
You see, he tries to act like he's being more reasonable than Lee Anderson by saying, oh no, it's not just Muslims who are protesting against the genocide in Gaza. It's also the far left, which is just basically what Suella Braverman said when she talked about Islamist cranks and left-wing extremists taking over the streets. But don't worry, I set him straight.
Femi Olawale, what do you make of that?
I'd say that as for the issue of who is pressuring the politicians to call for a ceasefire, that is definitely not just the Muslims. It's definitely not just the far left. It is the public at large, who overwhelmingly by 66% to 13% are in favour of a ceasefire. That's where the pressure is coming from. This attempt to essentially blame it on Muslims is clearly Islamophobic, and pinning it on Sadiq Khan is again Islamophobic, because the Metropolitan Police, they answer to both Sadiq Khan and the Home Secretary, but he's chosen to single out Sadiq Khan in order to make that sort of jibe. This is Lee Anderson we're talking about, somebody who explicitly said he plans to run the next election on culture wars. This isn't some slip of the tongue. This is deliberate.
Now, even though I managed to establish that the calls for a ceasefire aren't just coming from Muslims, they're coming from the public as a whole, we then got into this weird debate about what did Lee Anderson mean when he said Islamists, i.e. Sadiq Khan is being controlled by Islamists, because the dictionary defines that as fundamentalists.
So, yeah, this is about saying, Benedict, that Sadiq Khan, a Muslim, is basically being run by Islamists, who would be, I guess, people who adhere to a very extreme version of Islam. That's quite away from that nuanced.
An extreme version of Islam, it is core to very many mainstream Muslim organisations, the view that where Islam can be established, that the Sharia should be observed. It's not controversial, actually, to say that.
Did you hear what he just said there? Where Islam can be established, i.e. becomes the establishment, i.e. where Islam has taken over. That's what he's talking about here.
Can we please distinguish between Sharia practice and Sharia law? Sharia law implies that is the law of the land. It is not the law of the land. It cannot be the law of the land. In fact, that is far-right conspiracy theory. Now we've got Suella Braverman saying that Sharia law is taking over. This is what we're talking about. This idea of making this fear that, they're taking over. It's the same thing they had with the Jews will not replace us in America. This is far-right rhetoric we're talking about here.
But Islamism is not specifically about Sharia law. It is about living your life by the Sharia. That's mainstream.
Here's a catch-22. Either he meant Islamists in the sense of the normal thing of it applies to pretty much most Muslims, in which case he's saying that the Mayor of London is under the control of Muslims and therefore it's just attacking all Muslims, or he's saying that the Mayor of London is being controlled by the most extreme, radical, dangerous Muslims. So which one is it? Both of those are really bad interpretations to take. But you're not going to get away with this on this.
You get my point? Because saying that Sadiq Khan is being controlled by radical extremists is Islamophobic, because you're implying that a normal Muslim person is somehow extreme by default. But Benedict is trying to argue that Islamist means Muslims in general, which would mean that Sadiq Khan isn't clamping down on the protests against genocide because he's being controlled by Muslims in general, which is messed up for three reasons. One, as I said before, the majority of the public wants a ceasefire. Two, Lee Anderson called these people lunatics.
Because if you let Labour in through the back door, expect more of this and expect our cities to be taken over by these lunatics.
And three, it leans into the far-right conspiracy theory of Islam taking over. But fortunately, I managed to bring it back to the main issue.
Femi, you go first. What is going on here? Is this because Suella Braverman has been, bowling the bowling ball down the same lane? Liz Truss to some extent. Is this all about pitching for the Conservative Party after the election?
Oh, absolutely. Because if you look at, there was a poll that was done of Conservative Party members in 2020 that found that I think it was 57% of Conservative Party members have negative views towards Islam. I think just under half of them consider it to be a threat to the UK. That's who they're aiming at. And the problem is, unfortunately, the Tories keep getting in because of our skewed voting system. Most people are much more tolerant views. Most people, as I said, are in favour of a ceasefire, don't believe we should be supporting a genocide in Gaza.
A lot of people
That's where
support
most
Lee
people
Anderson.
are.
A lot of people support Lee Anderson.
The man's about to lose his seat in Ashfield. He's been kicked out of the Parliamentary Conservative Party. He is not a popular man.
Look, if we want politicians who consistently reflect our progressive values so we're no longer governed by bigots, then we need a voting system where everybody's vote counts equally. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.